We're here to discuss Silicon Valley real estate market. We're going to be looking at these slides over the next 30 minutes. We're looking at single-family homes focused on Silicon Valley, which makes up Santa Clara, San Mateo, and Alameda counties. We'll then look at the greater Bay Area, which includes the Central Valley being Sacramento and San Joaquin Valley, and the Central Coast being Monterey and Santa Cruz. I'm Richard Calhoun with Creekside Realty, working in real estate for 40 years, been doing statistics heavily since 1997. Happy to work with anybody that's interested or getting more details. Reach out to me and we'll get started here in just a second. Here's the first data slide. It's summarizing the heat maps that we're going to be going over. We'll come back to this at the end when it will make a little bit more sense. This is the active listings. I do not have this data for Alameda County, and it will be some time before I get it for Alameda County. The red color, as most of the balance of the Silicon Valley is, indicates less inventory than normal, less inventory than the past 10 years, and that would tend to favor the seller. You can see the percentages over here. Some areas are slightly higher than 100%. A lot of the areas, the bulk of the areas, are below 100%. The Milpitas, North Valley, Berryessa, Santa Teresa micromarket area has the least inventory with only 34% of the inventory expected based on the 10-year median. This now is flipping over and looking at the number of offers. Same concept, but here there's also a lack of transactions, a lack of offers, which favors the buyer. The real key is the balance between the two, which is measured by me in days of unsold inventory. Only looking at active listings that don't have an underlying contract on it, how long would it take to sell them? And this is looking at that number compared to the 10-year normal. And you can see that there are some areas above or right around 100%, which above is the blue color, right around 100% is the white color, and below 100% is the red color, because that means a faster marketplace favors the seller. This is actually now the raw count. So now we've changed over, comparing it to where you'd expect the market to be to where the market actually is. I consider anything between 40 and 80 days to sell the inventory to be a balanced marketplace. Below 40 is a seller's marketplace, above 80 is a buyer's marketplace. You can see the vast majority of the areas in Silicon Valley are in the teens, which is obviously a very fast marketplace. The bulk of the areas in San Mateo County are somewhere in the 20s for the most part, which is sort of still a seller's marketplace, but getting closer to a balanced marketplace. The exception, of course, is the expensive areas in San Mateo County with 120 days, which would clearly favor the buyers. And if you go over into Alameda County, it's somewhere in between on the speed, very low 20s, very high teens, which would obviously be a very fast marketplace. If you're selling everything in under 3 weeks, that's pretty quick. This might make more sense because it's not a theoretical number. It's looking at the sellers that tend to take the longest period of time, the 75th percent seller. How long are they taking to sell their property? Or another way to look at it is 75% of the homes that sell are selling in less than this time frame. And in Santa Clara County, that time frame is basically right around 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks in San Mateo County, and a little under 2 weeks, around 12 days in Alameda County. Overall, very quick marketplace, with probably Alameda County being the fastest, followed by Santa Clara quick on its heels, and then finally San Mateo County being the slowest. And we'll see the common theme throughout the presentation for some time now is, since the pandemic happened, the desirable areas close to the work centers are less desirable now because people are doing remote working, making the outlying areas more valuable, more desirable, and therefore a hotter marketplace than they're used to being. Now what we're looking at is what kind of price reductions are the sellers taking before they get an offer in. Red color means a very small price reductions from 99 and a quarter, so only a quarter of 1% reduction to 0.1% above. So basically right at 100% is where the hottest you'd expect the market to be. Right now, some of the areas are hotter than that. The typical seller, the average seller in Union City and Newark's raising their asking price 1% before they get an offer. And the same with Saratoga and Los Gatos. They're actually raising their price to some degree before the offer comes in. Then you have areas like the expensive areas in the coast in San Mateo where they're actually taking a price reduction. This is a very tight stat and may not make a lot of sense to a lot of people because most sellers are doing a lot of homework before they put the property on the marketplace and put it on the marketplace at market value and sell. And with things selling that quickly, they don't have time to do a price reduction, even if they're off the mark a little bit. You can see the areas in Santa Clara County are 99.2%. It's just a very tight market. Another way to look at it is the coast, San Mateo County coast, with a 3% reduction, and that was a slow area, or the very slow area at 120 days being the expensive areas in San Mateo County is only taking a 1.4% price reduction. This makes a little bit more sense. This is how common is sellers reducing their price. And you can see in Santa Clara County, they're all single digits for the vast majority of the point, except for the sort of the West Peninsula, sort of the expensive areas in the county, which are in the 2 digits. You go up into San Mateo County and it's basically all 2 digits. You go back down into Alameda County and it's low single digits for most of the areas. So in Alameda County, you got 1%, 4%, 3% of the sellers taking any sort of a price reduction before they get an offer in. You can just see price reductions for the seller are very uncommon. Now we flip over and look at what the buyers are doing. What are the buyers doing to, when they make an offer, to see what happens to try to ensure they get the property? Here, the overbidding in Santa Clara County is around 5%, 5-6% for the most part. It's probably even 3 to 6%, 7% in San Mateo County. And if you go up into Alameda County, you're probably more like 7 or 8%. Right now, a fairly close-knit area, but it does spread out quite a bit. And in fact, you can see Oakland at 12% above, and Berkeley and Alameda at basically 17% above the seller's asking price. So the seller's asking $1 million. The offer comes in 17% above that at 1.170. That's not insignificant. There was a time during the very hot marketplace of 2022 and 2023 where we were seeing 18% typical overbid in the whole Silicon Valley. We're nowhere near that number now because of the market correction we went through in the starting basically second quarter, if not earlier, of 2023 through 2023, and now the market's rebounding a little bit. But every time we go through an adjustment like that, the buyers are hesitant and aren't as free in their magnitude of overbidding. This is the frequency of overbidding. How common is it? And you can basically see all the areas, including almost the expensive areas in San Mateo County, are just below 50%. All the other areas are above 50%, with a lot of the areas right around 3/4 of the sellers getting more than their asking price. Very common for the sellers to get more than their asking price, even if it's only a little bit more. And the hot spots again are Oakland and Berkeley and Alameda at almost 80% in Alameda County. Now we're looking at the appreciation since the last 9 months of 2015. Here you can really see the areas that used to be very desirable for the job center are all blue in color. That means they're having less appreciation than the median appreciation for Silicon Valley. And then if you look at the more outlying areas, that's where all the red is. They're more desirable because people are willing to commute further now because of remote working and that kind of stuff, not needing to go into work 5 days a week, maybe more flexible work schedule where you can come in at 10 o'clock and go home at 7 o'clock so that you avoid some of the rush hour traffic. Anyway, it's pretty clear. This is one of the clear presentations of where the appreciation is happening. And the reason it's over such a long period of time is whatever's having the most appreciation in the recent time frame typically has the longest, best appreciation because of compounding of that appreciation rate. You're appreciating now at a higher dollar amount, and it doesn't take long to catch up. So even if these outlying areas were doing less earlier before the pandemic, and it's my belief from the data I've seen that most areas, given no disruptions in the marketplace, basically appreciate at the same rate. We clearly had a disruption, and that's favoring the outlying areas and hurting the inlying areas, and you see that really clearly here. Now what you're looking at is the price. Most people follow the median price, which is the center number and which is where the color is assigned. The number to the left is the cheapest 10% in that given micro market area. The number to the right is the most expensive. The white color is the median price, which is basically the Fremont area and also the Campbell area in Santa Clara County is sort of the median price for Silicon Valley. If you're red in color, pink to red in color, you're above that median price. If you're blue in color, you're below that median price. So you can see the expensive areas are basically along the peninsula, the west side of Santa Clara County and the peninsula. The more affordable areas are the central part and the eastern part and Alameda County, which is exactly what people would expect. This now is sort of a recap, so you can see where your different 20 micro market areas in the 3 counties in Silicon Valley are. You can come across and see what the conditions are, and I've added a new column here that isn't integrated into the heat map because it would be the same as the price, which is a calculation of the estimated payment. I probably will making a slight adjustment on that because of the recent issues with insurance, which is getting more expensive. So these payments will go up a little bit, but not very much. And it'll be pretty much across the board since it's a fairly small amount of the payment. But you can see, I don't know what area we want to pick, maybe Cupertino, Sunnyvale. Right now, they only have 49 listings, 78% of what you'd expect to have. They had 94 offers, which is 96%, almost 97% of what you expect. So it's neutral. That's going to give them 16.8 days of unsold inventory, and the days of unsold inventory is more rapid than normal because you had a greater percentage of the offers compared to the inventory. So you're at only 78% of your days of unsold inventory, and a low days of unsold inventory is a faster market. 3/4 of the sellers are selling their home in 9 days, just over 1 week. The sellers are actually increasing their asking price by 0.3%. That's, overall, if you put it in a blender, what's the increase or decrease. But it's only 3% of the sellers are doing a price reduction. So that's a pretty small number. I don't track, believe it or not, the number of sellers that are increasing. So 3% of the sellers are reducing their price. The vast majority are keeping their price right at their asking price, and some small percentage is increasing it to get that 0.3% increase. The overbid from the buyers is 8.5% above the seller's asking price. Then that's on average. You have to also look at the 10 and 90 percentiles to sort of get a range on that. The frequency of overbidding is just shy of 3/4 at 73%. The appreciation since 2015 is 58%. So the prices now are 158% of what they were the last 9 months of 2015. The cheapest home you'd expect to find is just under 1.9 million. The typical home is about 2.6 million, and the most expensive home you'd expect to find is just over $3 million. The payments are all wrong this week. I'll look into it and find out what went wrong with that. Now what you're looking at is Silicon Valley as a whole. These are the 3 components. The inventory is the purple line. So right now you only have 65.5% of the inventory you'd expect. So there's a shortage of single family homes. The offers coming in are at 71.6%. So there's more offers coming in compared to normal than there are available listings. That should give you a faster paced marketplace than normal, and you can see it does. You're at 91%, and the lower the DUI, the faster the market. If you're having a typical marketplace, you'd be right up here. So we have a shortage of inventory, but we have a shortage of offers, but a greater shortage of inventory, giving us a faster market by 9% than we typically have at this time of the year. This is looking at the reduction of volume. This is a thing that I think most people aren't paying enough attention to. We're only selling this week 88% of the previous 25-year low. So we go back 25 years, back to 1998, I guess it would be at this point. We find the lowest number of transactions, which would have been 2328 transactions, and we're only selling 2,200. So that's basically this 87%. It's basically 12.1% lower than our previous low out of the 25 years. It's the lowest number of offers accepted in the past 25 years, obviously the lowest number in the past 10 years. And you can see that's where we have been for quite a long period of time. The exclusion is right through this period of time, which was the peak of the pandemic when they came out with the announcement on March 17th of 2020 through when we could start showing properties again on May 1st of 2020. So for the period of time that we weren't even supposed to be showing any properties except for those that were vacant. Initially, we couldn't show any properties, then we could show properties that were vacant, and then we finally could show any property with all the precautions that were being followed at the time. It's this lack of inventory that has me concerned. Not lack of inventory, but the lack of volume. There's no volume. The reason that's a concern is that means that the market could go very quick or very slow. quicker than normal because you don't have any sort of buffer. There's no cushion at all. And I think the reason for this is pretty evident. You know, everything seems to be pandemic driven. Everybody had a change in their housing needs, which explained the huge surplus of transactions as soon as we could start showing houses in May of 2020 that lasted for basically almost 3 years, good 2.5 years, 3 years. And people that were going to move did move. And so now there's not as many sellers. The pressure, people accelerated their plans because their needs changed. And now we've cleared out the future pipeline for some period of time. It makes sense to me that there's a shortage of inventory. And then with the rising interest rates, there's a shortage of buyers. Here is the payments, and these actually look accurate. And these are Silicon Valley over the 30 years. So the cheapest 10% home, the payment would be about $6,600 a month. The typical home payment's about $12,000, and the most expensive payments in Silicon Valley is up here at $24,000 a month. These also assume 80% loans. A lot of people in Silicon Valley put more than 20% down. Some people go with adjustable loans to get the payments down. The reason I did this was just to show the payment. And if you come down here to the purple line, the median priced home, as the market was going up, the market was actually on fire, but then the market was actually cooling as payments were going down. And that's something that I think would surprise a lot of people. Payments were actually lower in August of 2022 than they were in May of 2022, despite because the price decrease was greater than the rate of interest. And then we went through this little increase, and now we're going up. We now have higher payments than we did at the peak before. But this really is very telling that the slowdown that we experienced was not related to the payments, because payments were actually becoming more affordable, which should have been bringing buyers out of the woodwork. Now we're going to go through a little graph, and I think I'm going to change this starting probably next week. I think I'm going to get rid of my red and blue arrows. It's just too time consuming. It also has me moving the graphs around a little bit so it gets jumpy. So I may come in, clean it up, and let the computer do it all. But basically, down in the direction of the blue arrow is a cooling market. Up in the direction of the red arrow is an improving marketplace. The worst we've had in recent time is the dashed line here, which was 6 months ago, December 27th of 2022. The best month is way up here, and that would have been basically Valentine's Day of 2022. So that was right sort of at the peak of the marketplace just before the collapse became apparent. And we'll step through going a month initially with dotted lines, then dashed lines, and then solid lines as we get more current. And at 3 months back, we changed to weekly. So there we go. The months are stepping through. Now we change to weekly. Weekly are the dashed lines. Now we're solid lines for the last several weeks. So basically, you can see that the market slowed down, turned around, and improved with some fluctuation in between. And this is looking at the seller's ask price reductions. And the reason that's important is you don't need to wait for escrows to close to have the data points. So you eliminate 5 weeks of lag time, so you can see market shifts more real time. But if you look at this, you're only looking at 12.5% of the marketplace right here. And that's because it's such a tight condition. Right now, the purple line, basically it's saying 85% of the sellers make no price adjustment at all before they sell. And the 2.5% sellers that are taking the biggest price reductions are only taking a 10% price reduction before they sell their property. Again, that indicates to me that a lot of sellers are doing fairly good research and are putting their home on the marketplace close to market value. Now we'll do the same thing, but flip over and look at what the buyers are doing. And this time, and up to the right is an improving marketplace, and down to the left is a decreasing marketplace. The best line we ever had was March 29th of 2022, and that requires the closing dates. So the peak of the market was basically 5 weeks before that, which puts you back into February, which is earlier than most people think the market changed, but that's what the data says. And then the worst month we had was way back shortly after World Trade Center, November 30th of 2001. And with that, we'll step through. You can see the decrease. And right about now, it's going to start increasing. And the resistance of going up is because of the decline in price, in my opinion. So you can see that we're nowhere near the peak of the marketplace, even though things like days of unsold inventory are not that far off of the peak of the marketplace. Buyers are just way more conservative in how much they're willing to overbid in this climate after the recent adjustment. Now we're going to look at the individual components over time. The next several slides are the same, where the blue line is going to be the coolest market condition you'd expect. That would be the 10 percentile and the most favorable to buyers. The red line is the 10% most favorable to the seller, or the 90% for the buyer, the worst conditions for the buyer. And the gray line is the balanced marketplace, where you'd expect the typical. If you're right on the gray line like we were here right at the beginning part, July of 2022, you were having a completely normal year as far as the level of inventory available. You can see right now we're basically having the least amount of inventory that you'd expect. The 10 percentile number is 1752, and the number that we actually have is 1773, essentially identical. I actually had to separate the numbers to make them readable. Listings you'd expect to have are 2,700. We're missing about 1,000 listings, or more than a third of the marketplace is missing from Silicon Valley. Now you look over and see how many offers you accept. And here, we're down here and we're below the 10 percentile. So we're having even less offers than the 10 percentile that you'd expect for this time of the year. And that number is 2,061. You'd expect to have at least 2,300. So we're having 15% less than the least you'd expect to have. And then the typical you'd expect is up here at 2,880. Again, you're off by about 800 list offers accepted. The most would expect to have is 3,200. You're a third off the most you'd expect to have. Here's your days of unsold inventory. You'd expect to have 33 days. You have 30, so it's 10% faster than you'd expect. 29 days is the fastest you'd expect it to be. So we're very close to that fastest marketplace. Up here, 42 is the slowest you'd expect it to be based on the 10-year median. That's what the colored lines are based on. And I do that so you can see the cyclic trend. And I only go back 5 years because people can't remember the market back any further than that. Most people don't even remember 5 years back, but you can see how the market shifted. Here's the pandemic slowdown, for example. We were pretty hot all the way through the latter half of 2020, all of 2021, and the first part of 2022. But again, you can see that the market really started to turn earlier than most people think. It even just leveled off here instead of being below, it caught up. Basically in 2021, you were having a way hotter market than you'd expect. The fastest market you'd expect is the red, so you were quite a bit faster. And then with the new year, you're basically right on top. So the market already slowed down, even though people didn't realize it. And then when you start to cave down, that's when people realized that something was up. And that's one of the advantages of looking at data in detail, is you can see what the market's doing ahead of the typical consumer. Here is the DUI compared to normal. So remember, a DUI being slow is a fast marketplace and good for the seller, bad for the buyer. And right now you're at 91%. You'd be on the horizontal black line if you were at 100%. And again, you can see that you were way below. And here you can see that the real market started to change probably sometime in the first 3 months of 2022. And by April 1st, because these are quarters, the market was clearly slowing down, and the hottest market for closings was basically March 29th. And since it takes 5 weeks to close, that's putting you back into February. Now we're looking at the time on the marketplace for the 75th percentile. And again, the pattern is the same, but the purple line is the actual data. So you can see that in the latter part of 2022, it was taking sellers as long as you'd expect it to do, and it still was. It's only been in the recent months, basically maybe since May 1st, where the time for sellers to sell has been dropping off of the blue line. We're now getting to the part where we're actually a faster market than you'd expect. You'd expect 17 days for 75% of the sellers to sell, and now we're only at 15 days. The lowest you'd expect is 13. Again, a pretty compressed range, more compressed on the hot side than the cool side. The cool side, there's a range of 6 days. On the hot side, there's a range of only 4 days, and we're halfway in between with at 15. And unfortunately, days on market, it's whole days. So we don't know if this is 15.1 or is it 15.9, still 15. Here's the days on market versus typical. You can see that right now you're selling 12% faster than you'd expect. Earlier this year, we were just slower than normal like we were last year, but in 2021, we were significantly faster than you'd expect. Again, you'd expect to be at 100%. These numbers were down around 60%, so you were 60%, 40% faster than you'd expect, and that's for the 75th percentile on the marketplace. Here's your average asking price reductions. So this is the price reduction that you'd expect the seller to take. You can see the range is pretty small. It normally goes from 99% to about 99.8%. Right now we're at 99.5%. The hottest you'd expect it to be, the lowest discount you'd expect is 99.7. The most you'd expect is 99.1. People could easily argue you can't really see the data difference because it's so small, and I would say it gives you a heads up to pay attention if nothing else. This is the coolest market it's been in 10 years, and that's the hottest. If you're close to that, you know that that's a hot marketplace. You know, if you're way down here, you know it's a cold marketplace. It gives you some balance, because basically think of the colored lines as being the seasonally adjusted axis moving up and down. It's not like plotting numbers where you'd expect to have a horizontal x-axis. It's moving all the time, which is why I've added those lines on. Here's the price reduction versus typical. So right now they're taking slightly more price reductions than typical. Here is the frequency of price reductions, and again you can see fairly small numbers. We're only taking 10% of the sellers are doing a price reduction, and even in a hot marketplace at this time of the year, you'd expect 8.5% of the sellers to be taking a price reduction. You'd expect it to be almost 12, and the most you'd expect is to be 17%. This is the frequency of ask price reductions. It's 87% of typical. So fewer sellers are taking price reductions now than you'd expect. You can see earlier this year and late last year it was much higher than you expect. All 2021 it was lower than you'd expect. Here's the average overbid from the buyer's point of view now. The buyers are coming in. You'd expect it to be at 106.9 and it's at 106.6. So it's essentially exactly where you'd expect it to be. The least you'd expect it to be is 4% above asking price, and that's almost insane. But at this time of the year, Silicon Valley on average is typically paying 4% above, and that's based on a 10-year median. So it's going back, and you can see that Silicon Valley very rarely is expected to be below 100%, and it's basically a result of the transactions that are negotiated at the end of the year when there's less competition. Here's the frequency of overbidding. How common is overbidding? And again, it's sort of eye-opening that 60% in a cold marketplace of the buyers still overbid to try to ensure that they get the house. And in a hot marketplace, it's 84% of the buyers overbid. Right now we're at 71%, slightly under the 73 that you'd expect. Even though the market's super fast and aggressive, we're a little bit below the aggressiveness that Silicon Valley typically is for this time of the year. Here is looking at the price over time for Silicon Valley. So the 3 counties put in a blender. The line is sort of an estimate of what the typical appreciation is. When you're above the line, you've had experienced a great appreciation in the recent time. When you're below, you've had under appreciation from what you expect. Right now at $1,570,000, you're real close to the line that you'd expect, and that's basically looking at the 10-year rate of appreciation. Well, it's not quite 10 years. It's basically from the 9 months of 2015. Here's looking at the active listings, and now what we're doing is we've changed from looking at Silicon Valley as a whole to looking at Silicon Valley's 3 counties. And again, it's Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, and Alameda County. You can see the pattern is the same between all the 3 counties, but the big takeaway here, in my opinion, is San Mateo County is basically having pretty close to the normal level of inventory at 450 listings that you would, but Santa Clara and Alameda County are down here right around 650 in rough numbers, and typically you're up here around 1,400. 2 of the counties have a huge deficit, a deficit of about half they only have half the inventory they'd expect, and San Mateo being the smallest county County has about normal inventory. Overall, I think the number was somewhere around 65% of the inventory you'd expect, but the shortage in Alameda County and Santa Clara County is greater than the combined Silicon Valley data would suggest. Here's the number of offers accepted. Same concept. San Mateo County now you can see at 400 is down a little bit from the maybe 500 that you'd expect it to be. Alameda County is at 760. That's down probably the most because they would expect somewhere up around 1200. Santa Clara County is at 900, and again you'd expect some number around 1175. Alameda County is having the greatest reduction in the number of offers, but they probably also have the greatest reduction in the number of available listings. Here's the days of unsold inventory. You can see, and this is just raw count. So Santa Clara County is the fastest at 24.8 days, followed by Alameda County at 31.5, and then finally San Mateo County coming in at 39.4. And at 39.4, it's almost getting into the realms of a balanced marketplace. I would even say at 39, it could very well be a balanced marketplace favoring the seller slightly. You know, it's not a black and white, you get to 40 and it changes over. It's a gradual scale. Days on the market for the 75th percentile. So how long is it taking? Santa Clara is the fastest at 14 days, exactly 2 weeks. Alameda County comes in a little bit slower at 16. And finally, San Mateo County comes in at almost 3 weeks at 20 days. And I think if you went anywhere in the country and said 75% of the sellers are selling their home in less than 3 weeks, I think almost anybody would say that's incredible. We just are spoiled here with the speed of the marketplace. And that's probably because of our housing shortage. And it sort of documents that we have a housing shortage. This is the magnitude of list price reductions. You can see San Mateo County is having the most reductions at 0.8%, followed by Santa Clara County at 0.6, and finally the least reductions is Alameda County at 0.4%. And see, even if the number is tight, when it all makes sense like this, you can see that there is some value to the data point. This is the asking price reduction frequency. You can see that Alameda County has the least amount of reductions at 8.1%, followed by Santa Clara County at essentially 10%, and then finally San Mateo County with 14.5% of the sellers taking a price reduction. This is the buyers coming in with their overbids. In San Mateo County, it's 3.6% above the asking price, Santa Clara County 5.3%, and Alameda County basically 10% above the asking price. And the range is fairly significant too. I probably should look and see how easy it is to do that. But you know, the average gives you some idea of the relative differences and how the market's changing, and that's part of the goal. Obviously, if you want private consultation on what to do on a particular house, you know, I'd be open for that. Here you are on San Mateo County, where the frequency of overbidding is 61%, so almost 2/3, just shy of 2/3% of the buyers are coming in over asking. In Santa Clara County, it's just over 2/3, and in Alameda County, it's just over 3/4 of the buyers are offering more to the seller than the seller is asking. Here's the appreciation since 2018. You can see right now Santa Clara County has the highest appreciation at 83%, followed by Alameda County at basically 70%, and the least amount of appreciation is San Mateo County at 60% appreciation. Here's the sale price on log paper, and the reason you do it on log paper is you can draw the straight line and sort of see the rate of appreciation. You can see the rate of appreciation for the long term is roughly the same on all of them. We're going through a little perturbation, you know, in the recent time frame because of COVID. You can see there's been times when San Mateo County have gotten very close to Santa Clara County, which is pretty unusual, and that's because of the advantage of being close to work in San Mateo County is not as valuable now, so that devalues the property, which is why they've had lower appreciation. Here is the same information on regular paper for those that prefer. Here's looking at the estimated payments. These numbers look reasonable, with Alameda County at $9,500 a month, Santa Clara County at $13,300, and San Mateo County at $14,100. Here's a recap of the data, actual numbers if someone wants it for the 3 different counties. You have the combined Silicon Valley on the left, Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, and Alameda County. You can come back and look at your individual slides. You can also get a printout of this, and the URL will be at the end if you want a PDF of the slide presentation. What we've been talking about is Silicon Valley, which is Santa Clara, San Mateo, and Alameda counties. We're now going to go to what I call the Greater Bay Area, which adds in San Francisco and Marin, the North Bay, Central Valley, and the Central Central Coast. Here's the numbers starting in the reverse order, so you can start off there and pick what number you like to see the best. And then if you look at the inventory, and inventory is really noteworthy, just look at your Central Valley and your North Bay. They were up here typically, pick any number you want, 4,700, whatever number you want to pick. And now they're down here somewhere around 1,500. The Central Valley is the least at 1,500. So they're like 1/3 the inventory that they typically are having at this time of the year. And Silicon Valley, being the purple, is at 1,800. It's down, it may be down 1,000, but North Bay is down something like 3,000. It's down 2/3. Central Coast and San Mateo County are down, but not nearly as much. And Central Coast is down more than San Mateo, and that's pretty apparent because Central Coast is normally a higher inventory level than San Mateo, and now it's reversed, so San Mateo has higher inventory. So San Mateo is clearly being the hardest hit in the current marketplace, and probably they're not even realizing they're being hard hit because the market's so strong, but the rest of the area or surrounding them is doing even stronger. Now you're looking at the number of offers. You can see San Mateo County has got roughly the same number of offers it normally does. Central Coast actually has a shortage of offers, and North Bay, and all these have a shortage, but the shortage of offers is significantly less than the shortage of available inventory. Here's the days of unsold inventory. You can see that typically Silicon Valley, the purple, is the least, and right now you can see we're basically right on the heels or tied with Central Valley. In fact, they both numbers are at 30. Then you have North Bay coming in at 34. Then you have San Francisco Marin coming in at 39, and finally you have Monterey at 51. So even though Monterey is saying, hey, the market's great, we normally up here somewhere around 80 days, and now we're only at 50, they're nowhere near as fast as the rest of the 4 regions. Now you're looking at the days of on the marketplace for the 75th percentile seller. You can see Silicon Valley is the fastest at 15 days, basically 2 weeks, followed by Central Valley at basically 3 weeks, and then you have the other 3 regions basically right at a month at 30 days. Here's the magnitude of overbidding that the buyers comes in. The least is Central Coast at 100%, Central Valley next at 1.5%, followed by North Bay at 2.3% and 2.93%, call it. And then you basically have San Francisco and Silicon Valley at 6% and 6.6% over their asking price. This is the frequency of overbidding. Silicon Valley is the highest at 71%. You got 2 regions, San Francisco and Marin, and North Bay tied at, it looks like 59.5. Then you have the Central Valley at 56, and the slowest area is the Central Coast at 44 days. Frequency of sellers reducing their asking price. Silicon Valley has the least with 10% of the sellers reducing their asking price. The other 4 regions are pretty close together from 15 to 18%. This is the average overbid. Silicon Valley is up here at 4.5%, followed by San Francisco and Marin at 3%. Closely together are North Bay at 101.4%, the Central Valley at 0.8%, and Central Coast sellers are getting their asking price. Here's the appreciation, and you can really see the San Francisco Marin has fallen down, and again, that's job related. And with pandemic, you can see that, pre-pandemic, San Francisco Marin was right in the mix, but fairly quickly it came down compared to the other regions. You can see that Central Valley in the yellow was sort of in the bulk of it, and now it's right there at the top, so it sort of had the most appreciation. Here's the estimated payments, and again, these numbers do look like they're valid. I guess I should go back and look at the first slide. I don't know why one slide would be so different, but these look fairly good, and you can see, even if my exact numbers are not right because of my estimates that I'm using the same estimates, so you can see the change in the payments. And right now, even though prices are climbing, payments are climbing as well, and payments in San Francisco and Marin are basically the same as they were at the peak. They're higher in Silicon Valley, they're higher in the Central Coast, they're a little bit higher in the North Bay, and they're slightly higher in the Central Valley. So you can see that Silicon Valley has probably had the biggest increase in payment. So we've been talking about Silicon Valley real estate market week number 23. If you want to go look at the archives, you type in this green URL, which I call my root URL. If you want to come to the presentation live Saturday morning at 9 o'clock sharp, you add in the year 2023 to the end of the green URL. If you want the handout that I was talking about, you type in the green URL and then H for handout 2023-0610 for the handout for this presentation. If you want a specific presentation, you type in the green URL, year, month, and date code. Open for any questions, and my contact information is at the bottom. Not hearing any questions, I'll call it a week. Thanks. Have a great week. Bye for now.